Hello, and welcome to our Korean class for beginners. This is the Seoul subway map. Here are some of the most crowded stations. Myeongdong, Itaewon, Seoul, Dongdaemun, Gyeongbokgung, Hongdae, and Gangnam. Have you ever been to or heard of any of these places? Next, in these photos, we will show you some things that represent Korea. I'll explain them one at a time. This is the Taegukgi, the South Korean flag. This is the Mugunghwa, Korea's national flower. Taekwondo is Korea's national martial art. This is Hangul, the Korean writing system. We have kimchi, a traditional Korean food. This is Seoul, the capital of South Korea. This is a hanok, a traditional Korean home. This is the Hangang River, which crosses through Seoul. And lastly, this is hanbok, traditional Korean clothing. Have you heard of any of these? In what language were all the things you saw on the screen written in? Yes, that's right. They were written in Hangul, the Korean writing system. Who invented Hangul, and why and how did he do it? And what is the Korean language like? Let's take a look. This is Korea's scientific research station at the South Pole. Do you know what it is called? This is a special city in Korea. Do you know what this city is called? The king pictured on the Korean bill is a very famous king of Korea from the past. Do you know what his name is? The answer to all these is Sejong. Who was King Sejong, and why is a scientific research station named after him? What about the special city? How did his face end up on Korean money? King Sejong, widely considered the best king of the Joseon dynasty, was known for his great achievements and is widely respected to this day. He began many projects in the fields of agriculture, science, medicine, music, law, and others, and the Korean nation was founded upon all of his projects. But most of all, King Sejong is known for inventing Hangul. Have you ever heard of anyone else inventing the characters for an entire language? King Sejong created Hangul in 1443. So, how was Korean written before he invented Hangul? There were actually no Korean letters before that time, so scholars had to borrow Chinese characters to write things down. However, it was not easy for commoners to learn Chinese characters, which is why they could not read nor write. This often puts commoners in unfair situations. King Sejong was disheartened by this inequality. His love for his people made him decide to invent a Korean writing system that could be read and written by everyone. After a long period of researching, King Sejong was finally able to create Korean characters that could easily be learned. King Sejong named these characters 훈민정음. Later on, starting in the 20th century, people began to refer to the system as Hangul. Thanks to the invention of 훈민정음, all Korean people could easily learn how to read and write. In Korea, each year on Hangul Day, October 9th, we celebrate King Sejong's incredible creation and distribution of Hangul. The story of how Hangul was created and its logical characteristics are so scientific and so impressive that in 1997, UNESCO designated the 훈민정음 해례본, the original copy of the 훈민정음, as a memory of the world. I previously mentioned that Hangul is very logical scientific, and impressive. But what principles was Hangul based on? There are 3 principles behind Hangul. First is the principle of hieroglyphics. Second is the ideographic principle. And third is the principle of phoneme medial final consonant. The principle of hieroglyphics refers to the fact that the shape of most Hangul characters is like the shape of the mouth when the characterized is vocalized, as well as shapes such as the sky, the earth, and people. The ideographic principle refers to the idea of adding extra strokes to existing characters to make new ones. This made Hangul easy for anyone to learn. The principle of phoneme medial final consonant relates to separating a syllable into 3 parts using a consonant, vowel, consonant structure. In the case of Hangul, there is not a separate set of consonants for the final consonant. Instead, it uses the same set of consonants for both the phoneme and final consonant. How were the vowel characters created? They resemble the shape of the sky, people, and the earth. To be more specific, they take after the round shape of the sky, the flat shape of the earth, and the shape of a standing person. The vowels were created by combining 3 basic characters. The character a resembles the sun rising from the east, while the character o represents the sun setting to the west. The character o represents the sun rising in the sky, while u resembles the sun setting beyond the horizon. Using variations of these shapes, 10 vowel characters could be created. So, how were the consonant shapes made then? The shapes of the consonants take after the shapes of body parts, such as the throat, tongue, gums, teeth, and such, when we vocalize these sounds. This way, people can look at each character and be reminded of how to read it out loud. Using this logic, the characters 기억, 니은, 미음, 시옷, and 이응 were created. 기억 resembles the base of the tongue, blocking the throat. 니은 resembles the tongue being placed against the upper teeth. 미음 resembles the shape of the mouth. And 시옷 resembles the shape of our teeth. Lastly, 이응 looks like the throat when it vocalizes this sound. The basic consonants were created under this principle of hieroglyphics. On top of this, additional strokes were added to make characters that require more aspiration when pronounced. For example, you can add a stroke to 기억 to make 키읔, or to 디귿 to make 티읕. Some consonants are doubled to make other consonants. This tells us to accentuate the consonant, making a stronger sound. For example, we can write 기억 twice to make 쌍기역, or write 디귿 twice to make 쌍디귿. Modern Korean makes use of 22 consonant characters. They are
기역, 니은, 디귿, 리을, 미음, 비읍, 시옷, 이응, 지읒, 치읒, 키읔, 티읒, 피읍, 히읗. 쌍기역, 쌍디귿, 쌍비읍, 쌍시옷, 쌍지읒.
There are 3 ways to make syllables using Hangul. First, you can make a syllable with just a vowel. In this case, since there is no consonant, we should put an iung in its place. Second, you can combine a phoneme and vowel. If you put kiok and a together, it makes ka. Third, you can combine a phoneme, vowel, and final consonant. Hyut, a, and niun can be combined to make han. It's important to remember that you do not write them out individually, like hyut, a, niun. Instead, you have to put them together. When the vowel character has a vertical line, like a, it is placed on the right side of the phoneme. The final consonant is placed under the phoneme and vowel. Meanwhile, if the vowel has a horizontal line like it is placed under the phoneme instead. In this case, the final consonant would still be placed under the phoneme and vowel. Did you enjoy the lesson? I hope you are now more interested in the logic behind Hangul. Now that you know the core principles of the system, you should be able to understand Hangul easier and be able to learn it a little bit at a time. How many people use Korean? Korean is spoken in both North and South Korea, as well as in Japan, Russia, China, and many other foreign countries with Korean immigrants. Korean is also one of the top 10 online languages worldwide. More and more people are also trying to learn Korean now, thanks to the increasing popularity of K-pop songs and K-dramas. By learning Hangul and Korean, I hope that you can start to feel closer to Korea. Thank you.